What happened here at Kent State University 50 years ago defined an age.
The guardsmen opened fire on the students.
67 shots. At an anti-Vietnam War protest, 4 dead, 9 injured.
When we look at protests in the United States,
6 days of rioting in a Negro section of Los Angeles left behind scenes reminiscent of war-torn cities.
And the voices of the unheard.
The protesters are tired. They're tired of going through the same thing over and over again. I think what they want to see is just some type of immediate change.
Activists inform the masses of the root causes of the issue.
100 years ago, Abraham Lincoln declared as President of the United States that all slaves would henceforward be set free. Now, both black and white Americans were preparing to march to say that a century later, the black man still was not completely free. If I am not free, you are not free. If one man on earth is partly enslaved, the world is not completely free.
Of the empire that is the United States, not heeding their calls.
It will be a victory for democracy.
From bus boycotts and sit-ins in the 1950s and 60s in the South to the Native American movement in the 70s, those are just a few examples of how boycotts in America have been used as a tool for social and political change.
While much of the work is done through those on the ground.
In 1966, Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion of the world, was banned from boxing in the United States after he refused as a conscientious objector to serve in the army.
Boxing is nothing like going to war with machine guns, bazookas, hand grenades, bomber airplanes. My intention is to box to win a clean fight. But in war, the intention is to kill, and continue killing innocent people.
Sports over the years became a pillar of amplification, like Muhammad Ali's refusal to serve in the Vietnam War, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who placed first and third in the 200-meter event at the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico City, used their platform to protest the mistreatment of black and brown bodies back home in the United States.
If you're in a racist society, and you're being discriminated against, it's up to you to do something for yourself. If you live in a racist society, you naturally have to react to racism if you are attacked. If you're going to do something about it, you do something about it on the basis of your race. We don't catch hell because we're Christians. We catch hell because we're black.
A young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would boycott the Olympics. Colin Kaepernick would lose his job.
Through the night.
Megan Rapinoe would protest, become a willing ally, and experience the wrath of not just a political faction of the U.S.
When you go down and take a knee or any other way, you're sitting, essentially, for our great national anthem. You're disrespecting our flag, and you're disrespecting our country.
But face attacks from the president of the United States of America. There are plenty of activist athletes, but one that we lost recently is a story the masses should know of.
I learned from yesterday. I dream about tomorrow, but I try to make today my masterpiece.
Bill Walton was an icon, a legend in the sport of basketball. From Los Angeles to Portland, the Hall of Fame to the broadcast booth, the man was simply marvelous. Dave Zirin would write of Walton. In the 1970s, he was among the most radical and polarizing athletes in the United States. When the Vietnam War broke out, there was Walton protesting with his fellow students at UCLA. He couldn't care less of the ramifications for his actions. He showed it through his actions. He was a phenom at the university, playing for the great John Wooden. Didn't matter. He was placed in handcuffs for his protest. While being against the war in Vietnam would put him in the mainstream today, writes Zirin, that was not the case in 1970, particularly during a period when the Nixon administration used athletes and coaches as symbols of patriotism and the war effort. For Walton, especially as a white athlete in the era of Muhammad Ali, to take such an anti-war stance was a big deal. He'd say protesting is what gets things done. The drive for positive change requires action. The forces of evil don't just change their ways. Wooden would go on to bail Bill Walton out of jail. And even though he said he disagreed with the protest, Bill Walton remained wholly undeterred.
And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. Well, I'm not a crook.
Walton would specifically call out Richard Nixon and inequality in an open letter defending Jack and Mickey Scott, the dichotomy that allows for the simultaneous rise of unemployment and corporate profits, the systematic suppression of natural living and healing methods, the double standards of justice that exist for poor people compared to rich people, the fact that if you are unemployed and broke and you steal to feed your starving family, then you face extremely long prison sentences in despicable places like Attica and San Quentin, while Richard Nixon, who tried to steal the country and jeopardize free elections, lives in luxury on the white sandy beaches of beautiful San Clemente. He would speak out for his inner circle when it was very taboo at the time to do so. Black people have gotten a raw deal for a long time, he told sports writer Bill Libby after his Vietnam arrest. A lot of my teammates are black, and I really admire the way they've risen above their raw deal. They're my friends, and I feel for them. I know I've gotten twice as much as I deserve because I'm white.
Jack and Mickey Scott are writers and critics of the big-time sports establishment. They were also apparently suspected, although never formally accused, of harboring Patty Hearst in a rented farmhouse in Pennsylvania last summer. Rather than cooperate with what they thought were the strong-arm methods of the FBI agents who wanted to question them, they went underground for 5 weeks. When they surfaced, they almost dared the FBI to arrest them if that agency had anything on them, which, of course, it didn't. In any case, they're here, and welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott.
Leftist Jack and Mickey Scott were confidants of Walton. Jack grew up a liberation jock and even sprinted for Stanford. Mickey founded the Institute for the Study of Sport and Society. In one of his books titled Athletic Revolution, he decried authoritarian coaching, ripped performance-enhancing drugs, and the commercialization of our games, and called for including more women and minorities. He would be named AD at Oberlin College, and he did a few things. The first was triple the funding for women's sports, which was unheard of at the time. He would hire black coaches, also unheard of at the time, and they won immediately, whether it was football, track, what have you. But that track coach was a known name. Tommy Smith, the man who protested with John Carlos at the 1968 Mexico City Games. Jack and Mickey would befriend the Symbionese Liberation Army. The group had kidnapped the newspaper heiress Patty Hearst from Berkeley. He'd later say that Hearst had been an eager SLA convert and had declined his offer to let her go. Quote, Patty was a rebel, he asserted via The Guardian. The FBI would investigate them for months. Some 150 days passed, and the Scotts were seen back in the public eye alongside Bill Walton. Berkeley.edu wrote they had a new supporter in Portland Trail Blazers basketball superstar Bill Walton, who shared Jack's politics and taste in music. Walton and the Scotts were so simpatico, in fact, that he invited the couple to live with him in his Oregon home. In the presser, his words ring hollow. Speaking to the Scotts at the news conference, Walton said, quote, I am sorry for any inconvenience I may have caused you, and you can rest assured that I will never talk to the enemy again. The Portland Trailblazers hated, and I mean hated this. At the time they put out this statement you see on your screens. It was the typical song and dance of, we are the greatest nation, bend the knee to us. We are the freest nation in the world. We're so free, 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 everyone free, stop complaining, etc. From Zyron, after Walton apologized to the Scotts for agreeing to be interviewed by the FBI, he called upon Americans to undertake the practice of non-cooperation with the existing government because of the inherent evil of that government. ESPN senior writer Ryan McGee would share on Twitter a Bill Walton story. In 2018, I was headed to San Diego to work on a big Walton piece, but news broke about the FBI investigating college hoops programs. I had to pivot to a Syracuse-Duke game to get news reactions from Jim Boeheim and Coach Mike Krzyzewski. I called Bill to apologize. His response, Ryan McGee, I would love to tell you that this is the first time that actions of the Federal Bureau of Investigation have altered the best laid plans of one Bill Walton, but that would not be the truth. The man was truly one of one. When injuries plagued him, the sports media industry used it as a gateway to be highly critical of him as a basketball player and a person. What has happened over a period of months is that Walton has done things his employers would rather he didn't, journalist Craig Ammerman wrote soon after the press conference with the Scots. Espouse radical causes, refuse to take pain-killing drugs, condemn capitalism, and become a vegetarian. Before the protests of Colin Kaepernick, Megan Rapinoe, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, there was Bill Walton. He told the press that he objected to the Star-Spangled Banner as the national anthem because it is a political statement devoted to war, bombing, killing. Wells Twombly of the San Francisco Examiner went after Walton, writing, "To most of his fellow citizens and many of his peers, Walton is nothing but a sociological traitor. The time for protest is past. That belonged to the 1960s." As we would learn, the shut up and dribble mantra was not birthed from the self-hating Fox News pundit Laura Ingraham. It was passed down from generation to generation. Walton hated it, saying sports encompasses all aspects of life, he said in 1991. It's unfortunate when people use the argument that it is not a platform for politics. I believe you can't stop and put sports in a vacuum. Just because people are involved in a special thing like sports, that doesn't prevent them from taking a position. It's why Steve James, the producer of ESPN's 30 for 30 on Walton, called him arguably the most outspoken white athlete of all time. In that open letter, he'd add, "Some of the actions of the government of this country that have led us to these conclusions are the brutal assassinations of President John Kennedy, his brother Robert, and the Reverend Martin Luther King, the imperialist and genocidal wars that have been waged against the people of Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and now possible U.S. role in a war in the Middle East. Also the backing of a military coup that overthrew a democratically elected government in Chile, just because Salvador Allende's economic politics did not coincide with those of special interest groups in the country, the murders of students exercising their constitutional rights at Kent State and Jackson State, among many others." He'd snap a photo alongside a plaque that would read, "Home of Eugene V. Debs." Debs was a leading pioneer in industrial unionism, societal reformer, and a peace advocate. Founded American Railway Union 1893, co-founded American Socialist Party 1900, and ran 5 times for United States presidency. Home built in 1890, declared National Historic Landmark 1966. Author Jules Boykoff would add of Walton's larger-than-life legacy. Bill Walton supported the American Indian movement when he lived in Portland. This attracted the attention of the Portland Police Bureau, which surveilled his wholly legal activities. Walton was a one-of-a-kind guy. R.I.P. I end with this. There will never be another Bill Walton. He was someone that always brought it. He was someone that cared. And we are seeing this with every single story of Bill Walton. I saw one where his longtime partner, Dave Pasch, who did the play-by-play, still does on ESPN, showing text messages of what Walton would send him, saying, "Hey, have you seen this Georgetown-Syracuse game? Oh, it's really tight. You should check it out." And Pasch is calling the game just to mess with him. They called each other nicknames like Solar because Bill Walton was a futuristic thinker, and he called Pasch Cole. There was the moments on air where he would throw popcorn at Pasch. He would play I think it's called a Glockenspiel. He had the Boris Diaw Beethoven rant. He certainly brought something that no one else ever has, because when we're going through, journalism school and broadcasting classes, we are taught to be, uptight and professional. And not that Walton wasn't. He was very professional in the way that he dealt with people and the way that he dealt with the broadcast. It was just from a warm, loving, inclusive, super knowledgeable, based in history perspective. And yes, he would go on different rants over and over and over again. But that is irreplaceable. The way that he appeared on White Sox broadcasts when he clearly had limited knowledge of the game and the players, but made it so enlightening and so entertaining. There was another play-by-play announcer when they were, I believe, calling an Oregon-Arizona game, because Bill Walton loved the Pac-12 conference to his core, defended the Pac-12 conference to his core, was open to being called a homer for the Pac-12 conference because he just loved it so much. And before the cameras went on, he said, hey, insert name, let's have fun. Because if we're not having fun, the audience won't either. Which is true. It's very true. And in this day and age, I truly don't believe that we will ever see a Bill Walton ever again. RIP to an absolute legend. He is irreplaceable.